Nice. It says recording. Give me the point, like action. Oh, action. Okay, great. Cool. Thanks. Hey, what up? Welcome. If you're tuning into this right now, you've probably been tuning in to our Bible study all week long, where we've been working through chapter 1 of Colossians. And something that we thought that we would try and see what could work in the midst of a couple different things was to sit down with our team and just talk through questions that we might have had as we were reading, that you guys might have had as well. Questions that you guys have shared as you've answered into this. So as we keep rolling over the next couple of weeks, if you have questions, like send them in, write them in the comment section on YouTube. But write them all in, but also to showcase what it could look like to be in a virtual group. We are kicking off virtual groups this Friday. You can jump in and be a part of that. It'll look very similar to this, where you guys will just get to talk, interact. Carrie's leading that. We have Johanna and Jamie and myself will be part of groups as well. But you'll have a chance to jump in. You can jump into any day during the week. We will be leading the Friday ones, but just a chance to connect with people that you go to church with, as well as work through questions in the midst of what we're walking through. So we're gonna work through chapter 1 today. We've been working through it all week, but as we've been reading it, we've all had questions. We've all had challenging things, exciting things, realizing new things as we've read it. But we've just wanted to kind of share with you what we've been working through, as well as answer some questions that you've had, as well as come up with some of our own questions. So as we roll through this, we're just gonna kind of bounce around, talk through things, and then hopefully next week when you write in questions, your question will be featured as well. So one thing that we talked about, one thing that we looked through in the very beginning of this, Jamie brought up, like, what does it look like to share your faith with your friends or family, and how that's hard and challenging, and how we don't know what to do with that. And so we'll start with Juliana. Juliana traveled the world
Sure did.
doing World Race. Yeah, you're welcome. Telling people about Jesus, getting to lead people to Jesus through that, as well as friends that have done that. So Juliana, as Jamie talked about sharing your faith with family and friends, what have you found out that's worked? What's been hard? Where have you felt challenged in that? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, this really hit home for me, because it's been really hard to share my faith, especially with friends from college, high school, growing up, things like that, because I definitely partied a lot when I was younger. And so trying to have that lifestyle and that past kind of behind me, and now step into this new life with Jesus. I remember at the beginning I didn't feel qualified, or I felt like a hypocrite, and just felt like it wasn't my place, or that I would be stepping on people's toes, and that other people who are more qualified than me have a better shot at reaching them. But I just found out that that's not true. And I also didn't want to be a Bible thumper. I went to CSU, and people would like attack me and be like, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" And I'd be like, "No, you can't ask me a question." And I would get into like religious arguments with people, because that was just fun for me. But I really didn't think that those people were deepening my faith at all. So I think that for me, the most helpful has been to just meet people where they're at, and not even necessarily try to throw Bible verses or like, "Hey, this is what's worked for me, maybe it's going to work for you" type of language, but just being their friend, having dinner with them, hanging out with them, just talking about their life and caring about them. And then they'll start to see it just through who you are. Jesus is within me. Jesus is within all of you, and he is fully capable of coming out and just like showing his love. And you don't really have to do anything at all. Like, the Holy Spirit works. You just have to love people and be a good friend and just be nice. It's not that hard.
Has anybody found ways that this has worked out really well, or on the reverse side, has anybody had ways this has completely backfired on you, as you've either tried to like love somebody like Jesus would, or tell somebody like Jesus? Has anybody had any that works out like, "Hey, I have this great story where this worked out really well, here's what I did," or has it gone the complete opposite way, where it's like it completely backfired? I for sure have some in the backfired section, so if nobody has some, I can talk for sure.
I have, they're two wildly different situations, and it's surprising which one went well and which one did not go well. So I, like, back in, I call it my old life, but like, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, I was trying to share this stuff with like my friend group at the time, and they were not receptive to it. They didn't want to hear about it. And so it was just kind of like a squash it and move on and don't talk about it again. It's not something we're interested in talking about. And it's like, okay. And then I don't know how I got on this conversation, but I met this guy in a bar recently at Juliana's bachelorette party. And
Nice.
and
There's the gospel.
and I don't know how we got there, but it started with, he was like, so what do you do? And I was like, here we go. And I told him what I did, and he was like, wow, really? And I was like, yeah, I know, it's crazy that I can have fun too. Like, it's not something that people think about. And so he just started asking me more and more questions about it. And then he was like, well, I live near DU. And I was like, oh, you should come check out Flatirons sometime. And I mean, this whole conversation, I shared the entire gospel with him. We talked about the woman at the well. Like, it got deep and it got so elaborate, and it was the most random experience of my life. And that's the only time, like, if I'm truly thinking about it, like in an organic context and not like teaching at students or something like that, that's like the only time that's ever happened in my life. And it was the most random experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like the random ones are the best ones, where it's like it just kind of flows.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that in the box at the Nuggets game, where some random guy was in the box with us and we started talking. I don't remember who the Nuggets played. Like, we didn't pay attention to the game at all. It was great. And then there's times where, like, me and my best friend Luke have talked about it, and we've just like been screaming at each other from like 2 inches away. It's not the best, but the way that Jamie ended day one and the way that she ended wrapping up verses 1 through 8, there's a question that she asked that I kind of want to twist a little bit, but she asked, what motivates you to pray? Because that's what Paul's talking about in that. But replace the word with pray to anything that's connected with God. So what motivates you to connect with God? So right now we're in the midst of quarantine. We're in the midst of either like losing jobs or maintaining our jobs, but not knowing how to work our jobs. And in the middle of that, like, the only way we're going to like push through this and work through this and feel like we're making progress in it is through our connection with Jesus and connection with God. And so, like, what, Dan, we'll start with you. Like, what right now in the midst of everything is motivating you to pray or connect with God, or like what keeps you rolling in your relationship with God?
Yeah, I was texting with a friend, and he said, a friend back in Sydney, and he said something, I'll paraphrase, like, I don't know how people without God are handling this situation. And I think that gets to the bottom of, I don't know, I feel hopeless and totally out of control. And so, very simply, it's so nice to be able to go to someone who provides hope and is in control.
Yeah.
And even if we don't have answers, you know, if God is good and has a plan, then that goes a long way to getting through something like this, I think. And so yeah. I think like kind of those things that we take for granted in everyday life, particularly in the West, that make us so comfortable, those being gone now kind of force us to reckon with big things like that. And whatever that like faith relationship looks like, I think we're searching as humans for answers and something beyond what we can kind of see and understand right now.
Yeah. What is that for you? So like the original question was like, what motivates you to pray? But like for you, like what does connection with God look like in good times or in times like this? Like what does connection look like?
Still me?
Yep. Still you.
I mean, I love songs. Ali and I have been reading through the Psalms every day together, and that's been really, really helpful. So kind of going to words written by people who have been following God for a long time and been through, and even, sorry, let me put that more clearly. Those people followed God for a long time, and then the songs that have kind of come out of their journey have lasted for a long time. And so to go to that kind of depth is super helpful, because it puts, I mean, our situation now is devastating, but terrible things have happened in the world before, and people have walked through really hard things before. And so I think that perspective also, you know, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and somehow like their words being helpful and comforting, like we read today about how God is a good judge and he's on the throne and he's going to execute justice in the world. You know, that's incredible, because there's so much injustice happening right now. And to go, okay, someone 3,000 years ago thought that was true, and then people have sung those words since then. I don't know, there's a depth and a grounding to that that's super helpful for me. And then kind of finding my own words and writing my own songs and prayers out of that. It's kind of nice to be a part of that, like to be able to join in that bigger story is sick, I think.
Yeah. In my quarantine, I'll write a song for you to sing, Dan. Don't worry.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll sing it. You write it, I'll sing it.
Done. Yeah. Well, it'll be vibey, like that thing I sent you earlier. So then we jumped into day 2, and as we look through verses 9 through 14, as Juliana kind of unfolded what that looked like, I think one of the biggest things that we learned from Philippians, but also through this, is like this idea of joy in the midst of darkness, in the midst of like hardship. And so Madison, for you, like right now in the midst of what you're doing in these day-to-day, being stuck at home, being stuck, being frustrated with things at work, being like working through all type of stuff, where are you finding joy right now? And where are you not finding joy? Where's it hard to find joy?
I think where I'm finding joy for sure is with my family. Day to day, me and my brother and my sister and my mom and my dad, we all have like completely different lifestyles right now. So we hardly ever get time to just sit down and talk about how is your day and how are things going for you. We're always in just a million different directions. So I think something that's brought me a lot of joy is just, as hard as it is for me to slow down, I've really enjoyed just spending time with my family and catching up and spending time with my little sister that I don't get to spend a lot of time with. I've just kind of realized how precious that is and how sometimes I take that for granted. So that's definitely brought me a lot of joy. And then also I think just being outside, and I've exercised more in the last week than I have in my entire life. So I think just being outside and really taking time to just focus on my surroundings, because I never do that. I'm always just tunnel vision all the time. Like, what do I have to get done? What songs do I have to practice for? What can I be doing to like help the people around me? So just focusing on myself and doing a devotional by myself instead of maybe doing it with a Bible study, which all those things are so great, and relationship is really important. And it's one of my favorite things about my life. But I think just finding a lot of joy in the stillness and the time that I get to spend with the people that are closest to me.
That's awesome. I haven't worked out at all, so I'm only shooting from here up as this has gone on. I'm also finding joy. Carrie's internet cut out in that while you were talking, and her face is like frozen on the screen.
Well,
so I'm finding joy there.
Recording from my screen, so
oh no,
there's hope here.
No, I hope it froze on yours too.
We can grab fun screenshots later.
Just
yeah. So thinking through that joy piece and looking through like finding that joy, in order to find joy, I think you have to like be like very intentionally looking for things to be thankful for. So has anybody in the midst of these past couple weeks like found things hard to be thankful for? Like as you've walked through stuff, as you've looked at what we're working through, whether that's as a church, with your job, with your families, with whatever, are there places where you're like, hey, it's really easy to be thankful right here and not right here, or vice versa? Has anybody struggled with that? I'll let it sit awkwardly for like 4 seconds. For me, there's been a lot like to be thankful for. I think there's a lot of things that are really, really good going on. Getting to connect with Booker, getting to connect with Taylor, still having a job, still having all that going for me is really good. But in the midst of it, I think my mental health has been where I've like either let things tank or let things like get away, where it's like I'm usually really good at like staying busy and staying focused on other people and staying like bought into what we're doing, and like the non-stopness of our job like thrills me and like keeps me going and like gives me life and meeting with people and all that. And so as I've been isolated, there's like I should be isolated. We should be away from people right now so that other people don't get sick and so this can stop. But it's also been like really hard mentally to like stay thankful. It's been hard to like hold on to that in the midst of like feeling, I don't know what being depressed feels like, but I feel like maybe I got close, and like it's just like soul sucking and like draining to not have that people interaction. And there's worse stuff going on in the world. So I don't want to like degrade that, but it's like, for me, my mental health has been the hardest thing to like be thankful for, or hold on to in the midst of something like this, which has been hard. And then I like tell Taylor that, and Taylor's super introverted, and she's like, I don't get what you're talking about. So it's like just completely different. She's like, Dan. It's like I'm married to Dan, is what it comes down to.
You knew what you wanted all along.
Yeah, all along. And then the way that Juliana ended day 2, looking at like what it would look like if we never ceased to be praying for the people in our lives and our world right now. Like, who right now, like normally in your life are you like, it's really easy to pray for these people? Like who's like recently crept up in your mind of like, oh, I don't usually think of that person. You've been able to like pray for them and think about them a lot more because of this. Anybody important that jumps out at you guys?
I think I don't usually think of, which I'm glad this has opened my eyes to it. I don't usually think of the people who work in hospitals, the people who spend so much time caring for people who are sick and who really, really need our help. And my Aunt Lindy works in the hospital right now, and just seeing all of the stories on social media and stories from her of how hard people are working day in and day out to fight for our health and for our safety. I think those are people that I've really taken the time to appreciate and pray for, because they work so hard. So
That's really good. Anybody else? Cool, great. Nobody else is praying. That's good to hear.
I was glad. I can't remember who wrote this down as a prayer point, but people in domestic abuse situations have been on my heart since this started. And Ali and I were talking about that this morning. It's just, I mean, it's like in our backyard, could be our next door neighbors. And this like isolation is maybe great for introverts like Taylor and I, but people with abusive spouses or parents or just dysfunctional houses and homes, my heart's really been going out to those people. And I mean, this is an exaggerated situation, but like that's something that is ongoing in our society and will continue after this finishes. But yeah, I was really grateful that we're glad that we could pray for that yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. It's been crazy to hear some stories of people getting out of that type of stuff in the midst of all of this, which is crazy. We have some stories from being at the Aurora campus of people that have gotten out of those in the past couple of days. It's like, I'm really thankful that they got out of it, but what a crazy time to have to figure out new living situations and where to get your kids and all that. So it's just been nuts. And then probably it just sucks. Probably the best teaching this week was the one that I did, obviously.
They were all
JK.
great.
They were all great. I'm just kidding. Actually, I hated mine and disliked mine the most. But the first question that I wanted to look at from that, which was verses 15 through 20, was this idea that Jesus is in all things and holding all things for the good. I think the ESV translation was holding all of that chaos together. And so, Jamie, like, what does it look like in your life to trust that Jesus is holding this all together? Where do you struggle to see that? Where do you struggle to hold on to that truth?
I think like when I think about that, where like trusting starts is, for me at least, like truly like believing, like that definition of faith, of like truly believing in the things that we can't see. Like we can't see what's going to happen or what the future looks like, but it's like that, like you said it, the thing that stuck out to me the most in your I think it was like at the end of like you saying like everything around us is spiraling out of control. Like there's nothing that we can control. We don't know what's going on, but like Jesus is there being like, hey, like keep your eyes on me. Like I'm not changing. I will never change. Like I'm holding all of this together. Like just trusting me. So I think like it starts for me of just like reminding myself of that and like truly believing like he's got this together. Like he's holding all of this together. And then I think like something for me is always just remembering like times in my past of like where Jesus has shown up and where I've trusted him in certain areas. and like where he's shown up, for me to just remind myself, like, yeah, he's still here. Like, he's not changing. He's got all this together. So yeah.
That's good. And then thinking through it as we read through more of verse, I think it's in verse 19 or verse 18, then switches from looking at Jesus as the Lord of creation to this Lord of redemption. And so, like, Carrie, looking at your life, what's one area of your life that you feel like you're controlling that you need to like let go of and let Jesus redeem?
It's a really good question. Which when I was like
Thank
thinking,
you. I wrote it.
but when I was thinking through them, I was like, I want to ask, I guess, that of you. Maybe I feel like you're really good at seeing those areas better, because right now I feel like, I shared this earlier, God's made it abundantly clear, like, that I have no control over anything right now, which is something that's so big for me, is like being in control and finding something I can't control. And for the first time probably in my life, I feel like this is completely out of my control. And so in a sense, I've found it kind of easy to let go of control. I'd say the most recently, it was like my job, right? So trying to find, with groups launching and all of that stuff, I was just on such a major like control streak and stressing myself out because I wanted everything to be perfect and everyone to find community. And so up until about 3 weeks ago, that is what I was holding on to for dear life, to have some control. But since all of this has happened, I kind of feel like I've taken my hands off the wheel and found so much peace in it. But if you see an area where I'm still like for control,
we'll save that for your one-on-one this week.
Okay.
So what do you think that was, like, in your mind? Like, what switched? So it's like, for you, it's like you are a person who loves control because you like to perfect an outcome. You like all that type of stuff. So like, what do you think changed in 2 weeks' time in your head? Like, I don't necessarily think it would be outside circumstances that would change that. So what do you think in your head changed in order for you to like wrap your mind around that?
Yeah. Man, I just like feel like, to your point of like that God holds all things. I am convinced now more than ever. Like, I feel like my faith is the strongest it's ever been, in the sense that I'm like, God, I know you have this. And like, yes, jobs are at stake and health is at stake. And I could sit here and worry. Like, if it were up to me, I'd be going over and like washing my nephew's hands all day long and doing all these things to keep them safe, because they're the most precious things to me. But at the end of the day, like, there's nothing I can do to change what's going on. There's nothing I can do to protect them. And so I've had no choice but to mentally like look to Jesus and say, you are in control. And like, if you are who you say you are, then I need you to show it now. And so I've just kind of rested in that of like, I actually believe you are who you say you are, and you're going to do what you promised to do. And then just rested in that. And luckily it's been a forced rest. So those things coming together of like me making that decision plus not having any choice actually in it, has made a really big difference for me, I think.
That's awesome.
I wonder if part of the gift of this season is that like the curtain gets stripped back a little bit. Like, we are important in God's creation and he has good things for us to do. But I wonder if a lot of the control that we have taught ourselves to rely on is an illusion. And something like this strips that away and says, actually, this world is bigger and more complicated than you even like can fathom on your normal day-to-day. And this has given us a little bit of a taste of how far above us, the functioning of the world is. And to Carrie's point, it's like, okay, I can't do, what can I do? Like, we feel small in this. And even though there's tragedy that comes with that, maybe that's a good smallness that's creeping over us as well, because then it puts God in his rightful place more naturally.
Yeah, I think it's easy. That's been a huge learning piece for me, is like, it's easy for me to like let my confidence or my ego or like previous things that I've done that I can like stand on and go like, here's what I did. I can operate out of that mindset. And like, when I'm in that mindset, I'm feeling very confident and almost cocky to a point. I'm cocky a lot of the time, but it's like, this has been a huge
Huh?
eye-opening thing of like, yeah, it's shocking. Yeah, shocking. Dan, you were supposed to be muted there. But it's been like eye-opening of like, how often do I rest on that versus how often do I rest on like who Jesus is. And in times like this, like I want to be the one who's out there like organizing people to get people taken care of, to organize food for families, to organize like whatever that is. Like I want to be out there taking care of people. Am I doing that because I want people to go, oh, look at what Jesus is doing at Aurora, or do I want people to go, hey, look, here's what Cole's doing.
Yeah, and that's a good distinction, because those are good goals still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but the motivation and the posture is
what changes it.
A world of difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been eye-opening of like, there's a lot of things that I do when I'm in like again in that negative type headspace where I'm like, I need to do something to make myself feel good. What can I do to do that? And usually that rolls into a cocky attitude of like, I'm Cole Willard, I can do whatever I want to do. And it's just the wrong place to be at in the midst of something like it all the time, but in the midst of something like this especially, it just shifts the focus from where it should be. There's a question for everybody, and Jonas thinks that she's off the hook, but I got questions for Jonas later. But who are the people in your guys' life right now that you could say, like looking at Nicole's teaching from Thursday, like who are the people in your life that truly see you? Who are the people that you let in? Who are the people that you let those boundaries down for? Go.
Since I haven't talked, I'll chime in.
Nice.
I think for me, like I'm very introverted and typically a very closed person. Like I don't let a lot of people in. So I think it's a very like few select people that like truly see me. And I'd say like right now, and it would be my husband, Ryan, because I can just be like who I truly am, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. And just know that, he's not gonna judge or like walk away or anything like that. So I'd say that has been something that like after Nicole's talk that I've been kind of thinking about today, of just like, wow, like I don't think a lot of people, like I let a lot of people like truly see me. And it's so select of those people I truly let in. But
thanks. Who else? Julian, you're kind of in a new state with like, you have a husband now, you've had friends in your life that have held that spot. So like, what does it look like now to figure out that balance? And what does it look like to like let John in more than you have?
Honestly, I'm kind of an open book. And that, I think I learned that when I was like a missionary on the World Race. When I first started off, I was really closed off, and I was like, you have to earn like my friendship. And I think that's why I have some incredible friends in my life, because I'm really loyal and I have a lot of loyal people. But for the most part now, I think that I found when I am vulnerable and when I love people without restriction, that is that piece of Jesus that I was talking about earlier, that I think my vulnerability or authenticity leads other people around me to also be vulnerable and authentic. And I think that that's something that Jesus has gifted me with. And so I found that I don't really have a difficult time just stripping my walls down right away and bearing, it all like on my sleeve and being like, this is who I am. And I'm not ashamed. And seeing that side of me, like that's what God has done in my life. And I hope that through that people can also find Jesus. But I definitely think I haven't always been that way up until like 2-3 years ago. Like I was way more closed off than I am now. And I definitely have seen that as like a gift from God. So
now that you're on the other side of that, like what were you protecting when you were closed off?
Being hurt. I've just had really bad relationships, friendships. I've been hurt by family. And so it was just protection of, I can put out an image and everything else can just be inside. And then they don't have to see these tender parts of me. And then I don't ever have to get hurt. The pieces that I show, if they hurt that, I'm already expecting it. And then I'm never disappointed or let down. And so now I just feel like even if I'm vulnerable and people still hurt me, it doesn't matter because I have God and I have my husband, John, and I have like this core group of support around me that if somebody hurts me, it's like, whatever. I don't know.
Cool. Well, that's great. There was some feedback coming through. I think it's Carrie watching Real Housewives of Sacramento. So
It's on mute. It's New York, but it's on mute.
wow, you're really watching that. That's incredible.
I know. It's on.
So the last question that I want to ask before we jump into like final thoughts on the first chapter, Johanna, what are some things that God has given you to steward, and how are you stewarding them? So like, what does that look like for you? What has He given you? What has He given you before that? Like either you're not stewarding anymore. Like walk through all that. Like what are some things that God's given you, and how are you taking care of them?
Well, I think just like looking back on my life, like God's given me so much, and there's so much to be like thankful for. I think like right now in this season, He's given me like obviously my very small family of just my husband to like steward that relationship and protect that. And then also just like new friendships and old friendships to one with like you guys, like learning to be vulnerable and learning to like foster good relationships and different things like that. So I think there, and then also just with my family, like my core like siblings, I think something like God has just given me throughout like all of our growing up and different things was stewarding them and being the oldest of three girls, and then having an older brother as well. Just walking through like different like life stuff with them, and I guess so that those are kind of the things that God has stewarded me with, and and really protecting them and learning to value them, because those are the things that like those relationships and are the things that like won't fall away.
Awesome. Cool. And so lastly, before we close up shop and head on to chapter 2, what were some of your guys' biggest takeaways, or like what's the one, we'll go in a round of what was your biggest takeaway, or like where did God really light up of like, here's somewhere you really need to look at right now as you read chapter 1 all week long. Nicole, we'll start with you.
Hold on, let me pull it up. Can you say the question?
Can you pull it up? Yeah. What as you read chapter 1 was the most like eye-opening of like, here's where God is really illuminating that I need to either work on or acknowledge or whatever.
I think that like in the section that I really dove into about how Paul he didn't really like pose it as a question to the people of Colossae of like would you consider deepening your faith? He was very firm in like, no, you need to deepen your faith, like very firm in that. And I think that I so often get wrapped up in like, oh, well, I have to teach students every week, so I have to study the Bible because I have to teach on this. And then it's like, I don't do it for me because I'm like, well, I already did it for work.
Yeah.
So it's fine. But that's not deepening my faith. It's good knowledge and it's good study. But it's not deepening my personal faith and my personal relationship that I have with God. It's like, it's becoming a job at that point. And so I feel like I was really challenged with when it's like, it wasn't a question. It was you guys need to be deepening your faith, because I think that I'll only speak for myself, but I think that we can all agree that it's really easy to fall away. It's a lot of work to go farther and to keep up with it. But we could like drop it like that. And it's so easy. And so I think just that part of like, stop making it a question and just deepen your faith, because I know that that's what I want. And so it was the heart check of, why don't I do that? And so that's just really what's been challenging me. And
What was the answer to that question?
that I just make up excuses like, oh, I just did it all day long at work, so I'm not going to do it now. Like, I'm going to binge watch Tiger King instead, or something like that.
Which is not a bad second option.
But like, I feel like I am part of the group of people that always makes up a time excuse. Like, I don't have time. Like, I worked all day and I gotta cook dinner and I don't have time. But then I just scrolled through TikTok for an hour. And I'm like, I for sure had time.
For sure had
I
time.
think that being like in this isolation period is like, okay, no, you do have time, so do it. And that's just how it's been for me. And so I feel really convicted about that. So
great.
Yeah.
That's great. Mad Dog Vivi.
I think for me, one thing that when I was writing down some questions today was the prayer piece of just kind of realizing, especially with everything that's happening right now, like how connected we are with the people you're around every day, and then how connected we are with the entire world. How like one small thing can affect so many people, and just thinking like, how can we affect our communities, and how can we affect, like, this sounds silly, but like how can like Flatirons even just affect like the country and then affect like the whole world? Like, how can we be praying for people, and what impact can we make? And like, what would happen if we ever stopped praying for those people, and if we got to, like you said, Cole, like that joy, like how are we going to share that with other people, and how are we going to bring it to them in this time? So I think that's something that's really stuck out to me, is just how connected we are, and what I can be doing and what we can be doing as a team and as a church and as a community to just be praying for everybody and make sure we're doing what we can to just help other people see, like, okay, God is doing something in this. There are good things that are going to come out of it, as hard as it might be. So I think that's what I've taken away.
That's awesome. Julianna.
I like the R at the end of the name.
Yeah, I'm just trying to talk more like Dan.
So I would say that the piece that I was convicted about personally is prayer. And when I was reading through my section, it's like Paul couldn't do anything because he was in prison, but what he could do was pray. And I feel like very convicted in the fact that I am such like a doer and I can't do anything. But it was encouraging to know that I can pray, but convicting because I don't often turn to God in prayer first. I'll turn to a lot of other things, but actually like disciplining myself in prayer was something that I really needed to take a look at this week, and feeling encouraged that I can do something through prayer. And then also, Cole, I know you said your part wasn't your favorite or your whatever study, but I loved it. And I loved when you went through and talked about that all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And that has just stuck with me all week long, that all things hold together. And it really does feel like the world is falling apart some days, or that your job is falling apart, your life's falling apart, your family's falling apart, your finances. But man, that verse was just so encouraging to my soul, of knowing that it's held together. It's not even like starting to crumble, like that God's got it so tight in his hand. And that's just been something that I've really clung to this week, of I can be worried that I'm not doing enough, or that people's lives around me are falling apart, or that my life's falling apart. But that truth right there, that God has it held together, makes me not worry as much. It makes me have a lot of peace. So that's kind of my takeaway.
That's awesome. That's cool. James?
I think the biggest thing that I got from this, or I think it's more of something that I feel like I'm struggling more with, is one of the questions, Cole, that you asked at the end of your talk, of like, what what am I holding on to in my life that I'm not letting Jesus take head of? Like, what is it that I'm still like not giving up to him? And I like really thought about that question, and I'm like, I didn't know the answer to it. I didn't know like I know that there is a lot in my life that I'm not letting him take full control over. But kind of like that has just made me kind of dig more into it, or want to dig more into it and kind of figure that out of like, what does that look like? Like first figuring out those pieces in my life that I'm not giving over to his control, but then also like, what does it actually look like for me to give control over to him? So yeah, I feel like that's been something that I'm like want to dig more into.
Yeah, wrestling through
that out.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Jonas.
I think for me it was probably during Juliana's talk, just on the joy and that whole section. Because I think through this whole process, and then even before, like finding joy is just difficult, and I think that's something that God's kind of been working on me for a while. He's put some different people in my life who are like so joyful. One of them is like Madison's mom, who's my mentor through this.
Oh,
and
she's
like,
too joyful. Yeah.
She's so joyful, and it's like refreshing to be around her. And then when I was in Africa, just literally right before this all started, being around a lot of the people there who literally have nothing. They're just the most joyful people, and we actually like came up with a saying of just joy, and as cheesy as that kind of was, like it's so true, and like how hard it is for me in like circumstances like this where, you know, I'm like over the top blessed and over the top just like I have everything I need. We don't really have a concern like financially or anything like that where I can just like find myself like angry with like circumstances I can't control or anything like that. So I think the joy piece was really what hit me hard on this one.
That's awesome. Daniel?
Yeah, I think thankfulness. I think coming through Philippians and now into Colossians, Paul's hitting those same themes, right? Of be joyful, be thankful. And I've just been reflecting on how that comes from a security in knowing who you are in light of who God is and what he's done. And I think it's interesting how, again, Paul like upends power dynamics in this book, and we'll like see more of that as he unfolds his argument in Colossians. But it's like God is so secure in Jesus, was so secure that he gave up everything to come and sacrificially serve and love. And so that's what real power and real influence looks like. And if my foundation is strong and secure, then I have this position where I can be generous and I can celebrate and I can not hold tightly to things that I think I'm entitled to, or strive for influence and impact, because I'm secure in who I am in God and what he's made me to do. And so I think in a season like this, it's easy to focus on what's been taken away and what you've lost. But so many of the fundamental things, like that Paul unpacks in this, that we have an inheritance and that we can see the hope of glory in Jesus, those things continue and are way more valuable than being able to sit in Chick-fil-A right now. And so like what does it look like to not, I mean, it's right to be sad that, if you've lost your job, or for Ali and I, not being able to go back to Sydney and see our family and friends and hang out with our new nephew. But there's so many good things that we have that are super important. And so rather than fixating on what I don't have or what I think I'm entitled to fill me up, to spend this time cultivating a rhythm of thankfulness, and trying to figure out what really is at the core of who I am and who God is most important. And I think that's what Paul's trying to kind of call us as the church to.
That's awesome. Carrie DeWitt, you're on mute, so unmute yourself.
Prayer was definitely one that stood out to me. But it's been said. So the next thing that stood out to me was just the fact that like the whole reason Paul wrote this letter, or like the impetus for it, was that there was a lot of false teaching and false doctrine kind of permeating Colossae. And so it's like challenged me to think of areas in my life, like false doctrine, false belief about Jesus, about myself, and illuminated that. And so I think something I've really wrestled with probably in the last year is like, and I wouldn't tell you I believed this, but it like shows in how I show up in the world, is like, if I mess up or I sin or I'm not perfect, that it's going to affect my relationship with Jesus. And so that if bad things happen to me, or if I'm not seeing the things in my life that I want to happen, it's somehow a result of my sin or sinful nature, or something that's broken in me, that I'm kind of being punished for. And I know better than that. Like, I know that that's not who my God is, but it's how I'm living and like what I'm assuming about God. And also I think during this time of quarantine, like this false belief that like, I think that like God needs me. And if I'm out of commission, if I'm like offline right now for these next few months, like what's going to happen to the kingdom? And I feel like this is him just being like, look, I don't need you. Like, I choose you and I allow you to be a part of this with me, but life is still going. The world is still being held together, and life is going on without you somehow controlling everything and being in it. Like, I can do this on my own, and it is an honor and a privilege to invite you into this with me. So those are just some things that have really come to my attention lately, that I'm like wrestling with and hoping to like work through as we work through Colossians.
That's good. Mine kind of ties back in. I shared about it a little bit, but Juliana sharing that verse of like Jesus holding all things together. I think I love control a lot more than I thought I did. And so not only being in this time frame where it's like I have no control at all, but then reading that and reading like, oh, there's so much of my life that I control because I have some weird false sense that Jesus won't hold it together. Whether that's from like the chaos of things that have happened in my life before. Like, it's really easy for me to like focus on the negative things and not reflect back on the good and be thankful, like Dan was saying. And so looking at those negative things and being like, oh, well, I'll just take it. I got it from here. There's just this false sense of like ego and false sense of like, that I have the power or the control to do that. So that's been convicting of like, where am I trying to control things versus where am I like authentically being myself and just like being. I struggle with just being. I need to either be doing something or like helping someone or being what I think I need to be instead of just like being present. It's really hard for me. So that's been super convicting based off of that verse. Cool. Guys, thank you. We're going to jump into Colossians 2 next week, which I'm super pumped about. So if you guys have been watching, if you haven't been watching, go catch up, grab your Bibles, jump into those videos from before. But tune in next week. We're really excited to jump through chapter 2 and learn a lot more with you guys. Send us your questions. Thanks for being a part of this virtual Aurora until we can get back into the building. Love you guys. Thank you guys. Swipe up. Welcome to Nicole's channel.
All right.
Love you guys.
Love you guys. Later.
Bye.